Welcome to our Lunch and Learn webinar series. Today's topic, Succession Connect, Understanding the Immigrant Entrepreneurial Journey for Better Business Connections, is brought to you with the support of our sponsor, the University of Fredericton. My name is Tanya Seneschal, and I am the event manager at the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce. Our presenter today is the Fredericton Chamber's own Levi Lawrence. Levi is a passionate entrepreneur with a background in the food, hospitality, distribution, and e-commerce industries. Beginning as a chef with a special interest in the development of food-related businesses, he has continued developing his business connections and experience through the Wallace McCain Institute Entrepreneurial Leaders Program, and continues to share his experience and knowledge with various professionals and industry networks. Accompanying his passion for business development and food, he has a lifelong interest in other cultures, language, and travel. Having had the opportunity to work abroad and return, he is especially interested in working with new Canadians coming from afar to join his much-loved community. As succession specialist with the Chamber, he actively develops relationships with new immigrant entrepreneurs and investors and connects with local businesses to offer a succession solution as they transition to their next project or well-deserved retirement. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Levi.
Good afternoon. Just one second, I'll get the right slide up. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to talk a little bit about the Immigrant Entrepreneurial Journey. I'm going to take you through the entire sort of scope and the constraints and the emotions around it, on the hope that you're going to better understand the world that they live in. First, I want to give you a little bit of background information. The Succession Connect program is a 3-year pilot. It's hopefully a phase 1 pilot where we start small, and in the future phases we'll broaden the impact and geography of our efforts. We'd like to see New Brunswick-wide and Atlantic Canadian-wide supports. We're developed within the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce, and we're really proud of our partnership with the existing Fredericton Immigrant Business Centre and their Business Immigrant Mentorship Program and their Hive Incubator. We're funded by ACOA, the federal government, the province of New Brunswick, and the city of Fredericton. We also have some really valued corporate sponsors, including Grant Thornton, McGuinness Cooper, Scotiabank, and many other community partners, including Ignite Fredericton and the Planet Hatch. We connect with newly landed immigrant entrepreneurs, and we try to connect them with local established business opportunities. We have a special focus on those local businesses that have a succession challenge. We're hoping to see their business continue to the next generations and are opening to selling them to an unknown third party and potentially an immigrant entrepreneur. Now, I am using the word immigrant versus the word newcomer. Now, I find that this is something you want to, you can always ask. Every single client I've talked to who has newly immigrated to our region self-identifies as an immigrant. So it's not a word to be afraid of, but you can always ask what word they prefer when working closely with them. Specifically, the Succession Connect program does a few different things. First of all, we offer educational and advisory services. So exactly what I'm doing right now in this webinar. We're also building educational materials to help teach landing immigrant entrepreneurs how to better work with the local business community, what it means to buy a business, and what professionals you need to ask and what you need to ask and what you need to know. We also provide matching or connecting services. So we build relationships with local business clients and talk about the businesses they may have to sell if they're looking to retire. And we also talk to the incoming investor and immigrant entrepreneur about what they're looking for in the way of to make an investment or to buy a business or to partner with a business. And we make those connections. I work closely and I'm a part of the Fredericton Immigrant Business Centre, so I'm a resource and a mentor and an advisor for people who go through their Business Immigrant Mentorship Program, and also if they join the Hive Incubator, where you can rent space and start your business within a collective of other like-minded entrepreneurs, and I'm there as a support. I'm also proud to be a part of our programs, proud to be a part of the Chamber of Commerce and all of the different events and supports that they offer. So enough about me. I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to talk about how I'm defining the entrepreneurial journey. because it's important for us to just understand, what it means for those of you who aren't entrepreneurs and haven't started your own business, what that kind of looks like. And we're talking about generalizations. It's not necessarily, this is the one set journey. But I'm breaking it down, and I'm using some of the same terminology that they use at Ignite Fredericton in their programming. We have the ideation, validation, growth, and maturity stages of business. Now, locally, when I consider an entrepreneurial journey, there's not really a timeline associated with it in any way. It's really just a different phases that most businesses go through and what they look like and what kind of supports they might need along the way. So ideation is when you're the very first stage, you're identifying a problem, you're talking about the idea at the very early stages, just the very beginning of looking for funding needs or what you're going to need for a team, what your business model is going to be like, really early on is developing your idea. Validation is the second half of what we traditionally call the startup. It's when you're actually making the first attempts to sell your product or service. You have developed or are developing a business plan. You're making your first hires. You're doing your first actual hands-on activity, and you're paying close attention to the customers and the different people that are going to use your service or be a stakeholder in your environment. In growth stage, you have an operating business, and you're now, refining the way you operate. You're refining your brands. You're starting your sales and marketing strategies. You're building more robust systems. You're trying to grow your business and evolve it and develop it along your goals. And in maturity is at a point where you're not necessarily concentrated on growth. You're concentrated on operating better and more effectively. Often in the maturity stage, you're talking about succession or how I'm going to pass this on or how I can start removing my founder attitude at the business, and I'm trying to develop a business that will last past the founder. So this is the general entrepreneurial journey that will apply to pretty much anybody anywhere in the world, I would believe. In our region, specifically the Fredericton point of view, I've mapped out a non-comprehensive list of some of the supports in our ecosystem. We're really unique. In anywhere I've ever been and the people I talk to from other parts of the world, the support for starting a business, the funding, the mentorship, the programs that we have in Fredericton and New Brunswick and Atlantic Canada are really uniquely powerful and comprehensive. It's still a struggle to start a business. I almost think it should be a bit of a struggle. If it was easy, everyone would do it. But we have all kinds of supports. Now, the unfortunate thing is that many of these supports, and I don't really necessarily need you to read all of them, this is just a really big, messy vision of what is out there if you were going to start a business as a local business person. The unfortunate thing about these supports is that many of them don't line up with the unique challenges of the immigrant entrepreneur due to a number of constraints and influences that I'm going to describe for the rest of this presentation. Often it comes down to cultural clash, timeline constraints that are unique to somebody coming in as an immigrant in our region. But at some point, there's an alignment where they can start really taking advantage of this ecosystem. This is a look at how I picture the immigrant entrepreneurial journey. So this is we're going to go through each section. There's no need to absorb all of the words on the page. But I want you to see that we have re-ideation, because people arrive with an idea and they already have a business plan, but almost always you end up having to go back through the ideation phase after you've arrived in a new culture. And then you still go through validation, growth, and mature. But on top of that traditional business, entrepreneurial journey, you have a lot of other factors that constrain. So I'm going to focus on many of these different parts, but just before I get into them, you'll see the immigration process. So that's your first 3 dots. We're going to go through those, and they are a 2, 3, 4-year journey that is all part of you becoming an entrepreneur in another country, but it's unique to an immigrant entrepreneur. You also have what I have in the yellow, which are unique challenges that add to the stress, challenges, difficulty, and affect the way you can make decisions while you're following the traditional entrepreneurial journey. Overall, this path takes an average of 5, 7, sometimes 10 years of any entrepreneur's life. And we, in the local business community, so if you're a member of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce, for example, only really start to meet and develop relationships with any of these individuals when they've already been 2 to 4 years along their journey. So it pays to note that, even though they've just arrived, they've just landed, they're years into their commitment to come to this region and to start a business here. It is my hope that understanding the general experience, understanding this is a general overview, there's lots of unique and specific occasions for each entrepreneur, it'll help us as local business people to better support, integrate, and do business with these entrepreneurs. Not only that, they represent possible customers, clients, collaborators. It really just pays to know them and the situations around them just a little bit better. So let's go through this part by part. The Immigrant Entrepreneurial Journey, let's look at the very beginning stage. And most people don't even consider it a stage, but I'd really like to take a look at it. It's the attraction and recruitment stage. There's many different ways. I refer to it as an attraction point. There is always at some point an attraction point where they made the decision and they are trying to, or they've decided to immigrate to Canada, or specifically New Brunswick. That may be through a Government of New Brunswick recruitment strategy or trips that we do, because we do often go out and go to conferences and have essentially sales trips, selling New Brunswick and what we have to offer in Canada. There's also all kinds of Government of New Brunswick and Canadian and even industrial marketing strategies, virtually online and also at different trade shows all over the world, selling either our services, our way of life, and what we do. Many of our tourism marketing strategies could be considered immigration marketing strategies, because if you're showing them places that they might want to visit, you're also showing them places they might want to live. Various industries, professionals, non-governmental organizations, lots of referrals. I've seen some people who move here because of their relationship with Doctors Without Borders, Canadian doctors who happen to be a part of that program, who, the way they deported themselves and the way they communicated, they've made those people be attracted to living in Canada. Often I see client-supplier relationships that turn into immigration. And sometimes it's just random chance. There's literally some people who, they find out what's important to them. Maybe it's lifestyle of my children. Maybe it's great outdoors and nature. And they Google those terms and they find out that maybe Canada's somewhere they want to live, and they do a bit more research. Now, as way of motivations, almost all of the people I've spoke to who want to immigrate to New Brunswick, especially in the entrepreneurial space, are immigrating for their family. They're immigrating for their family to have a better lifestyle or less pressure, or to be safer specifically, to have a change of pace and a lower population, to have cleaner air, to have, there's a lot of great reasons to live in this region, and beauty is among them. Now, it's important to know that Canada and New Brunswick has a brand, and every brand has positive and negative attributes. When people arrive or they choose to immigrate here, the positive things that most of them are coming in looking for, they assume that we have, because they understand it from the picture we portray, is that we're very safe, and we are. We're very family friendly. We have clean air. Healthy living is easy. We're open and spacious. Especially in New Brunswick, the fact that we're bilingual is a huge selling factor. We're seen as honest, polite, friendly, and easygoing. Now, as business people, everybody understands that it's important to know the possible negative sides of our brand, just so that we can know that and we can start, and when we have conversations or dealings with immigrants or people abroad, that it's understood that there's possible misconceptions. Possible negatives, and whether this is true or just something to be aware of, is our weather and our crazy winters and our really high and low points in weather. Our low population, in New Brunswick specifically, our declining population. The amount of rural area, the general lower population. Most people have never even seen a city with less than 1 million people, and our whole province has 750. That's something to get used to, and it's a positive for so many, and for some people it's a negative. There's definitely some branding around, some of the bureaucracy and the regulations that we have, many of which make our lives what they are in a positive way, but they also, make it slower to do some business, and accreditation for your given field is difficult. We tend to be not seen as fast-moving or competitive on a world market when it comes to business. We also are seen as having higher tax rates. These are things to be aware of. Whether they're true or not, they're often what people expect when they come in. So we can have those conversations and we can make improvements as we go. So the immigration process. Now, I have learned a lot about this over the last 3 or 4 months. it's really important to understand the process that some of these people are coming through. And after we talk about the immigration process and the immigration challenges, which is our next slide, we're then going to really discuss how this affects them starting a business or buying a business in our region. But to start, let's talk about just the very beginnings of the immigration process. Every single immigrant goes through a federal vetting or approval process. Some can choose only to go through federal programs. If they're very specific candidates, for example, there's one startup visa program. If you have a business idea and you're somewhere else in the world and you can find an investor or a group of investors or a program in Canada that want to invest in your business, that'll speed you through an immigration program federally. And if you get approval federally, you can choose to work and start a business anywhere in Canada, and you're not tied to any province in any way. Now, all provinces have their own provincial programming that it can essentially add points or increase the likelihood of your success at the federal level, because you still have to go through the federal level. The decision of whether you can move and attain permanent residency in anywhere in Canada is always a federal level decision. In New Brunswick, for entrepreneurs, it's most common to use the Provincial Nominee program. But we see a number of different reasons and methods. Not all immigrant entrepreneurs that I'm meeting with or that are in our community come in as entrepreneurs. Maybe they came for family, or maybe they came for school, but at some point they made the decision to look at entrepreneurship as a way to build their own success in our region, and they also have many of these similar challenges. Now, there are many steps to the provincial process, and it typically also includes an exploratory visit. You may have met some of these individuals. They have to spend at least a week in our province, and they meet all kinds of professionals, advisors, stakeholders, and generally in all three of our main cities. This trip helps to educate them on our region, choose a sector, and also gives them points towards the provincial immigration application. Immigration timelines can vary, but when you consider that the combined processing times, the typical experience for entrepreneurs is 1.5 to even 5 years or more, because it really depends on where you're from. Often if you're from the Middle East, there's a longer period of application process and vetting and approval. Sometimes they can be 5 to 10 years. If you meet someone on an exploratory visit, for example, you may not see them again for a year, 2 years, 3 years. But it's important as an ambassador of our region, which if you're meeting somebody on an exploratory visit, you are, to make a good first impression. Now, once the province nominates or approves the applicant at a provincial level, the immigrant entrepreneur receives approval, the immigrant entrepreneur receives approval federally. They can then move to New Brunswick to the city of their choice. And once they're here, they can fill out the paperwork and receive permanent residency. With this document, permanent residency, or PR card, a newly landed immigrant has all of the same rights and responsibilities as a citizen, except for the right to vote, to hold public office, and that's for any of our 3 levels of government, or to have a passport. They are eligible for all business development programs, funding programs, subsidies, tax credits, or any other supports that a local business person might be eligible for. Unfortunately, they often do not know about many of them because, we have way more supports than most countries, and unless you're really connected and get a great mentor or a great support program, it's hard to learn about all of them, especially when you're not expecting them to exist. Often the immigrant entrepreneur has made commitments to a certain level of investment or time in a given province, but after those timelines, or in the event of not following those commitments, there might be a financial consequence, but they are still going to be a permanent resident of Canada and able to live or work anywhere in the country. We should keep in mind that it is our job as local residents, especially as local business residents and members of the Chamber of Commerce, to do our best to support their experience in any way. Because if we all agree that we want more of these individuals to stick around for the long term, that often means more than just a business transaction. Now, let's talk about some of the arrival and settlement challenges that are unique to the immigrant entrepreneur. Picture yourself moving to a new country with your family. Immediately, or even before, the following priorities take precedence over any business or employment concerns. You have to come in and you deal directly with essential regulatory bodies. You're going to have to get a driver's license. You're going to have to get a Medicare card. You're going to work with Service New Brunswick immediately. You're going to have to settle your family and whatever they need, whether it's education for a different age of children or trying to settle your spouse in different programs or so that they feel connected. It's understood that one of the things that one of the most critical parts of retaining an immigrant family to our region is supporting the spouse and making sure they're part of the experience and integrated in the community. They arrive and there's different culture and different food and different ways of absorbing media. And a really different tax system. There's definitely a few people I've spoken to where even though they academically understand how our tax system works to get all of the free services that we have as a nation, when they get their first bill or they see the deductions and the amount of tax they pay on every purchase, it's a really difficult mind shift. And it takes really some understanding and some education to get around that. These folks immediately arrive and have to figure out accommodations, whether they rent, lease, or buy. Most of them end up buying. They need transportation. I mean, they're coming from a place where the robust, most of them are coming from a place with a robust public transportation network. They arrive and we just due to our lower population, we have a little bit less transportation solution. So often you have to look at leasing, buying a car. You have to find insurance for everything that you do, whether it's in business and your home and your car and you personally and your life insurance. Now, all of these things are, just common. You would expect to be able to do them when you come to a new country. But what surprised me as somebody who has been in business for over a decade is that you cannot move to a different country and keep your credit history. All immigrant entrepreneurs, or all immigrants, period, as they land in the country, arrive with zero credit history, zero credit rating. Even if they used Royal Bank in Europe, which they have, and they arrive here and they use Royal Bank here, there is zero credit that's able to be transferred, or where there are credits like Equifax and TransUnion. There are a few programs trying to work on that, but for the most part, there's just no way for you to start with anything but zero. Now, there are some banks that work with the immigrant entrepreneur, but it's important to know that many of the people coming in and wanting to be entrepreneurs, and they've gone through the programs and the vetting, often they have a really high net worth, and they have a really great relationship with banks and investors and all kinds of those programs in other countries, and they arrive here and they struggle to get their first $500 credit card, or they have to have long discussions to be able to get their first car loan or their first mortgage. And it's, they're used to being a top, VIP in their world, financially and professionally, and they're coming in and it, even if we don't mean it, it often can feel that we're treating them as a lesser citizen. And it's all just about credit history and the way that our current financing and bank system works. At this point, I do want to stress one of the most important things, because I've talked to at least 30 immigrant entrepreneurs who have gone through the experience or have been here 5, 10, 15, 30, 40 years. And all of the people who had a great experience and look back on it as I made it had the right relationships early on. And there's no one way to get there, but if you talk to and build a relationship with the right real estate agent, the right insurance officer, the right bank, the personal banking representative, those affect the entire journey for the next decades, and also pairing the best advice for their specific needs. On top of all this, there's also, when they have culture and custom shock, there's known psychological highs and lows. On average, as you move to a new country and you're emigrating, you have a honeymoon stage. 3 months or so, generally, you'll have your stress crisis, your lows, have I made the right decision? Have I been crazy? Is this for me? Do I want to stay? And often, you go through a bit of recovery, and you only start to adjust to new space between 6 and 12 months. Now, keep that in mind, because as we talk about their business challenges and their business journey, it's important to note that often they're going to be going through some level of that 3-month and 6-month and 12-month psychological or emotional trip. Yeah, and also when you're having conversations or just networking with people who have just arrived, you can know this and ask how long since they've arrived. You can tailor your conversations, your offers of support, maybe even your tolerance for some of their responses and their attitudes, because you can understand and empathize with where they are in their journey. It's also, when you're talking about networking, important to know that polite is not always equal to friendly, is not always equal to open. Often, and I was guilty of this until I really got into this space, is because I'm always trying to be polite and seen as friendly, often I was not very open. I would meet somebody who was wearing a different garment or who had different dietary concerns, or, you know, or I would just see somebody who was obviously different, and I would be super polite, but I would never ask questions, and I avoided any deeper relationships or conversations because I had an unconscious fear that I was going to offend them by not knowing enough about their particular religions or customs or you know, anything about their culture. Asking more questions and having some of those really open relationships build makes a huge difference in their world and in our community going forward. Let's start talking about the actual immigrant's entrepreneurial journey. Like, you know, now have a better understanding of the challenges and the difficulties surrounding it. But at some point, especially if they've come through and they've gone through an immigration stream, they've declared, I am an entrepreneur and I'm going to start, buy, build, or partner with a business in New Brunswick, Canada, they have to start a business. And often they have to start it very quickly. We're going to go over some of those timelines in a bit. But the startup represents that ideation and validation stage. In my brief experience, as I mentioned, all immigrant entrepreneurs face a re-ideation phase. They have to have a business plan. They have to know what they're going to be doing when they arrive, but often that plan is 1-2 years out of date, or they just didn't have as good an understanding of the exact market and customs and whether their idea would work. So once they actually hunker down and start whatever it is, they almost always should imagine their business and really take a frank look at it. Even here, if you're starting, I would say it's good advice for anybody starting a business that they, at some point, you know, every 3 months for the first year, you're re-looking and really being honest about whether your business idea makes sense, whether you need to pivot, whether you need to change. It's important for us as local entrepreneurs, local business professionals who go to chamber events and who go and network with different industries that we're really professional. One of the things that is a skill that I've had to learn is how do I say nice things, be polite, and be friendly without giving automatic approval to a business idea. Most people really do not feel it's up to them to put down or say anything critical or negative about somebody's business plan. But if everybody is just being polite and saying that your business plan is a great idea and you're going to, you know, this is great, you're going to be a big success, you know, that can lead to false assumptions. So you don't always have to, if you don't know enough, you don't have to say, you know, oh, that's not going to work. But be careful not to automatically say that's a great idea. Make sure you're offering your honest feedback while also being polite. And recommend they go talk to people, anybody you know in your networks, specific to their industry, specific to their sector. Everybody I know in business in our community wants everybody else to succeed. Everybody's in a you know, trying to grow the pie instead of growing the piece of pie they have. So I really want to see, you know, not necessarily. I'm often coming in as a critical influence on business plans, and as long as you're polite and respectful, this is what they really need. The immigrant entrepreneur faces all of the same challenges that our local entrepreneurs face, but they also have the other settlement and immigration challenges we just went over in the last 2 slides. Depending on their immigration process, and most of them go through the PNP process, they're going to have to make many of these strategic efforts really soon, under a tight deadline, and they're probably going to be going through concurrently with their immigration challenges of settling their family and figuring out accommodation, and they're probably also going to have the psychological ups and downs of their honeymoons and their stress states and the recovery. Now, due to the policies and regulations around immigration and who gets approved, especially under the entrepreneurial streams like the PNP Entrepreneur or the Provincial Nominee program, many of our immigrant entrepreneurs do not have the same funding concerns as our local entrepreneurs, which is, you know, one of the major concerns and one of the major supports we offer in our traditional ecosystem. How to get funded? How do you get your idea off the ground? How do you find investors? But this does not mean that they don't need support. They just need a different type of support. And this is one of the reasons why some of our early stage supports for local entrepreneurs doesn't necessarily match up with the needs of the immigrant entrepreneur. Now, post-arrival supports that are working for them, there's not actually that many. I mentioned the full ecosystem, and a lot of those organizations, now they're eligible and they're able to use them, but the programs have different timelines or no timelines, and then the way you get into them and the way you work with them might not be up to the exact speed. Because remember, if you're a local entrepreneur, you may want to go as fast as possible, but you do not have a timeline constraining you on how to start and build your business. Often we talk about the lean startup, and we say maybe you should start your business with minimal investment, and you should sell it before you build it, is a common piece of advice. With the constraints and the way that you have to make investments as an immigrant entrepreneur, these options just aren't good advice for you. You have to make some tangible and quick investments, and you have to invest in infrastructure. So you really, when you're getting advice or giving advice, you want to make sure the constraints on them as an entrepreneur. Now, clear benefit or clear supports and resources they should as they arrive. They need to make sure that their language is as high a level as they possibly can. Different people come in with different levels of English, but they really, to operate a business in a different country, you need to make sure that you have a clear understanding of that language and you can communicate. So at almost any level of English or French, you're going to want to make sure you have further training and to bring your language level up and to practice the local terminology and colloquial language. Now, in Fredericton, one of the best things you can do is to come and connect with the Fredericton Immigrant Business Center, which is affiliated and connected to the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce. Now, we offer the Business Immigrant Mentorship Program, which is 3 months of training about law and accounting and business practices and culture and business, all kinds of things, specifically for the immigrant entrepreneur. And it's really vital that people take that in that first 3 to 6 months if they possibly can. And they also should make at least an introduction with the economic development agencies, either for their sector or their region. In Fredericton, they really should go and introduce themselves to the folks at Ignite Fredericton. And they go in and they introduce, like, this is what I'm doing, this is the business I'm opening, and ask simply if you hear of any supports or if you think I should do something, who should I talk to? And most people are arriving not realizing that such a support exists, because in their own home country that would just not be something that's offered. But the people who are really successful got that advice to go develop these relationships early on, and they were much more successful. It's also really important because they have to meet the right professional services. Whether it's for personal or business reasons, everybody who immigrates to New Brunswick, they're going to have to build a relationship with a lawyer, an accountant, a banker, an insurance agency, and real estate often. And having those right ones that understand the journey, that are as honest and supportive as possible, is really important for the long-term feeling they have about the region that they've moved into. So us as local professionals, offer the referrals, build the relationships. If you know somebody who is just the right kind of person or the nicer person, make sure you're offering those referrals and trying to guide people to the best services for their unique situations. After the startup, or actually let's take a second and look at the Provincial Nominee Program. This is one specific program with a lot of our immigrant entrepreneurs use. It's not all of them. So this is just a lens that when you're starting up a conversation, you hear that they're going through the PNP program, that should put a lens on the whole conversation, the constraints and the challenges that entrepreneur is going through. And I specifically would change the advice I give and the way I speak to them and the way I support them, knowing more about the Provincial Nominee Program. The Provincial Nominee Program is a process where the immigrant applies and goes through a process exclusively within the province to receive a nomination, which is approval from the province. Now that nomination goes into their application federally and grants them a much higher likelihood of being approved to move to Canada. There are multiple streams in this program, like skilled worker program, but we're concentrating on specifically the entrepreneurial stream of the Provincial Nominee Program. As I mentioned, most of our immigrant entrepreneurs come through this program. It's important to note when you're having these conversations that for the last 10 years, we've had a version of the nominee program that finished in late 2017, and a new PNP of the same name started at the beginning of 2018. So the people who have arrived and are currently starting businesses or building businesses under the PNP program are not following or have the same constraints as the people who you will see a year from now or 2 years or 10 years from now. It's really important to know that, and I'm going to give you some links and guidance because it's changed quite a bit. But here, let's look at a generalized view of the process. The entrepreneur applies, often through or with a consultant to the province, but not necessarily with a consultant. They have to write and have a business plan approved by somebody at the province. They have to show a certain amount of research and planning on their efforts. They have to have a certain amount of English or French qualifications, and in the new PNP, that's actually much higher. So you'll see more people arriving with better quality or communicative ability. They have to show a certain amount of liquid and total net worth. Now, those numbers have changed from the old to the new PNP. I'll give you some links, but they're coming in with a lot of net worth and the ability to make investments and to run a business. They also should be able to show past business leadership, business ownership, or senior management experience in their own home countries or in some other country. They likely, although in the new PNP it's not necessary, they likely have done an exploratory visit, or they do that sometime during the application process. So they have been to our region and they have been in our cities and they have talked to some people. They commit to making a deposit with the province. So as part of this program, they're going to put a monetary cash deposit with the province, and that in return, they've promised to commit a certain amount of investment or economic activity to, when in the first 2 years of moving to the province. It's also important to know that all provinces have a unique PNP or Provincial Nominee program. The PNP program in New Brunswick differs from that in PEI and Manitoba and Ontario. If they get approved and sign the PNP contract, because when they get approval, it is a contract, they add that to the federal application. And I should mention and clarify, this PNP contract is the document that many of the constraints we speak of for the immigrant entrepreneur come from. They are committing to a certain amount of economic activity and business pursuit in New Brunswick, for example, in return for that nomination. But if the immigrant entrepreneur does not successfully adhere to that contract, there may be the loss of their deposit, but their permanent residency stays in place and they can live or work wherever they would like in Canada. So even if they don't follow those constraints, they are still here permanently if they wish. Once they are federally approved, and if they have a PNP contract, they can then move to New Brunswick and receive a permanent residency, which means they have all the rights and responsibilities of any citizen except for the ones I've mentioned. They must make their committed investment through either starting, partnering, or buying a business in less than 2 years. And in the old PNP, there was extensions and there was other tools. In the new PNP, there is no other way to extend it. So you have to make that happen to a certain investment amount, which changes depending on which PNP, but it's a considerably large amount in less than 2 years. They must operate that business hands-on in the business for a minimum of 1 year after starting to be able to even apply for their deposit back. The Provincial Nominee Program in spirit aims to align potential immigrant entrepreneurs with the market needs of provincial demographics that we've identified, that we'd like to see more entrepreneurs, or we know that we're going to have a lot of businesses closed due to retirement or age. There are a number of specific to New Brunswick restrictions on how the immigrant entrepreneur can start or buy a business. Now, I have recently built a checklist. If you are helping somebody, talking to somebody, or if you yourself are thinking about selling your business, or you're open to selling your business because you're looking at succession, you're looking at a challenge, I've turned all of the new PNP, so that means people arriving in the next year or two, it's a checklist for you to look at your business or your opportunity, your friend's opportunity, to see whether it fits all the restrictions. So you can go to our website at successionconnect.ca, and under the seller column or a tab, so at the top it says program, and then you see seller. There at the bottom you can download a PDF. It's 2 pages, and it's just a series of questions, and you have to answer them all correctly. And then a person coming in, immigrating under the PNP program, who has to buy or partner with a business in less than 2 years, If you know that yours is going to be likely to be eligible, you have a real opportunity to communicate that specifically. If you're giving business advice, mentoring, or even partnering selling to a PNP immigrant entrepreneur, it would be recommended that you learn these constraints in the program. At some point, all of the regulations will be taken into account, and nobody wants to give misleading advice or to waste time and money to find out that what would normally be good advice or a great idea, if you had no constraints, could find out to be an ineligible investment for them to get their deposit back, which is often their first business effort, is to try to get that deposit back. Now, some of the restrictions are great, and some of them are a little counterintuitive, and it comes from decades of history of people using this program, and so it's better to just learn them. For example, you know, in the new PNP, there's a minimum investment, but you can't invest in a bed and breakfast. That's an identified business that won't be eligible for the PNP program. You cannot do a nonprofit business. You cannot do a business with less than 2 employees or out of your home. You can't do an entirely virtual or online business. There's a lot of these specific restrictions that you know, you just want to make sure you understand. There's a lot of language around passive investments, so you can't come in and simply invest in real estate. You have to look at buying a business. If you're buying a business, it has to be something that you are going to actively manage day to day physically. Now, I want to finish this slide off, and I want to talk about beware of cynicism. You know, I'm new to this world, and I've been learning rapidly. And my thought early on was, why worry necessarily about people using or frauding this system? You know, there's a lot of language about them buying their citizenship or buying their way in, and they're not necessarily following the spirit of the rules. But at the end of the day, it was communicated to me that one of the things we need most in New Brunswick is more people, specifically more people contributing economically, whether it's as a skilled worker or as an employer specifically. And we only get so many people approved federally to move to New Brunswick. So while we really want to make sure that people who a higher percentage of the people who are approved integrate and join and are more active in our economy and stay for the long term. Now, some definitely do use the system in some way, and there's all kinds of stories about that. But many are just simply, and many who leave are just simply, you know, they didn't have a positive experience by the whole system, whether it's, you know, the way they settled or one bad relationship early on, or were challenged in how they opened their business, or had misunderstandings, or other factors completely out of our control. You know, the community they happen to move into, the lack of urban transport, the lack of private education. These are all factors. It's not always that they come in with the intention to fraud a system or get in easily. Often I use an example that, you know, it's common if you're in a retail industry, you know that people steal in retail stores. Most businesses that have retail shops account for a certain percentage of shrinkage due to theft, whether it's intentional or innocent, because often, you know, you break the rules innocently without understanding that you broke the rules. That does not mean that we do not treat each customer with the benefit of the doubt and with an assumption of trust and potential positive business relationships down the road. I now notice a lot of language around me when people talk about immigrant entrepreneurs and people trying to arrive and invest and open businesses. And I notice a negativity and a cynicism that is really easy to see if you come from that space or if you have immigrated. So I want to make sure that everybody understands and keeps an open mind and pays attention. Now, I mentioned that there's a new and old PNP program. All of the details on the guide for the new PNP program is available on the government's Population Growth Department, which is welcomenb.ca. And if you go there, you can see the Provincial Nominee program is on the top of the menu at the right-hand side, and then you can look at the entrepreneurial stream and many others. It pays to understand that more if you're going to have to know that information. If you want information on the old PNP, you really have to contact them directly and have that sent by email. So people who are in your neighborhood today or tomorrow or anytime over the next year arrive to open a business as an immigrant entrepreneur will all be the old PNP program. So the new rules you see online won't necessarily apply. So let's look at, as they go to the next stage, which is the immigrant entrepreneurial journey post-startup. So in the second half of a business journey. And this is the growth and maturity stages. Now, by the time the immigrant entrepreneur is entering a growth or mature stage of business, they typically do not have many constraints from the immigration programs or as many constraints. So the PNP would be complete at this point. Or the immediate and early stress factors of immigration are no longer there. Typically, you have built a credit history, hopefully good. At these stages, we can see the local ecosystem, the way I originally mapped it on our first early slides, merging more with the immigrant entrepreneurial journey. The journeys start to align, and you can see a similar direction and a similar access to services, as long as they've been able to build a network and understand what's out there for them. It is also important to keep in mind that even without those constraints, there remains some unique challenges for the immigrant entrepreneur due to colloquial language, jargon, underdeveloped networks, ongoing settlement challenges due to education or how their family and spouse are integrating. Often, this is not just a business journey, and it has to be successful both personally and business-wise. Now, it is important to mention, if you get to the post-startup stage, all statistics point towards the immigrant entrepreneur being more successful in business survival past 5 years than the local entrepreneur. When you separate out the statistics, if you have an immigrant entrepreneur who started a business and survives past 2 years, they're more likely to be there 5 and 10 years ago than the local entrepreneur. Now, I don't know exactly why this is, but whether it is, maybe it's because the most persistent entrepreneurs make it through that fairly challenging 5 to 10 year process. Maybe it's another cultural difference that makes them more persistent or more likely to persevere. But it's important to note, like when you see somebody and they're actually building a business and they've been here for a few years, they're likely to be there a lot longer, and they likely have some kind of unknown processes that are making them more successful, and you might be able to learn from them. So let's take it back and just look overall at the whole path. It's a hell of a journey. It has ups and downs, rules and challenges, which, even just the regular entrepreneurial journey has all of those things as well. And this has even more challenges added to it. But it's important to note that we have waiting lists for those who want to go through this process and join our local business community, and only so many get approved to do it every year. Imagine these folks are getting on board for a journey that will often take a possible 10, 15, 20% of their adult lives to navigate for a chance to live in our region and to contribute to our economy. In many ways, the immigrant entrepreneur is one of the best chances at positive economic growth for our region. And much of their experience, their feelings about our region, their reasons for staying after 2 years, and their overall happiness can be boiled down to the professional and personal relationships they made very, very early on. One of the most of the best case interviews or best stories I've heard from clients come down to that professional or that mentor or that neighbor that really connected with me or provided transparent, open, pragmatic support. So let's look at takeaways. I want to briefly go over these. I'm going to mention these ones, and then I'm going to put in the comments on the YouTube page where this video is going to be all of the different comments and ideas that I get from you. So after this presentation or even during this presentation, feel free to tell me what takeaways you had, tips you understand from your own networks and your own experience, and I'm going to start consolidating them and making sure that we have a robust list of all the different ideas on our YouTube channel. So let's quickly mention, remember that the immigrant entrepreneur are your future business peers, and often proven business successes. They're just new to our ways. They're not amateur. Know and understand the challenges, or knowing and understanding the challenges can create opportunity. You can talk to them differently. You can empathize more. You can create more lasting relationships. Generally, as a life rule, more knowledge equals less fear, less caution, less hesitation. So you should always be asking more questions and taking up the opportunity to learn more. Partnerships are an underrepresented opportunity. The immigrant entrepreneur, through any of the programs, can partner, can buy 30%, 50% of a business and be eligible. This is a win-win where they come in with resources and passion, and you can help them integrate and be part of the local business community. Let's talk about how to be involved and how to be a champion. And I want to make sure that you send me these ideas and opportunities as well, and I'll make sure these make it to the comments. Show an active effort at chamber events. When you show up, you're trying to build your own network, but you can make a huge difference in our community by making an active effort to have a conversation, to ask questions, and to be more involved with newcomers that you meet there. Every 2 weeks is a coffee chat for immigrants all over the city, and most of them are in business. You can check out our website at successionconnect.ca or our Facebook and Twitter pages to find out when those are. And they're a 2-hour chat, meet and greet, and locals are all welcome. It's a really important way to meet the community and integrate. As I mentioned, the Fredericton Immigrant Business Center is a really valuable resource, and you can be involved as a mentor or in some of our programming. Same with mentorship and advisory roles. One of the successful things that a few people are doing is they're offering job shadowing opportunities. When you talk to somebody who maybe they want to open a food business or they want to open a retail store, and you have a similar business or you know somebody, offer them the opportunity to come and work in your business. You know, there doesn't have to be pay, but often there's a huge amount of learning about, you know, how customer service works and how human resources works by just letting them into the inner workings of a business. Company tours of different plants, facilities, or offices and professional services. Those are really valuable insights that you can offer for very little cost. And always be looking for partnership opportunities. Now, as I mentioned before, I just want to mention, we only exist and we're able to offer these educations due to our funding partners. So we have ACOA, the federal government. We have the province, Population Growth Departments. We have the City of Fredericton. We also have our community partners. Corporate and community partners, which would be Scotiabank, Grant Thornton, McGuinness Cooper. We have Ignite Fredericton, Planet Hatch, Priority Personnel, and Kiers Marketing, who helped build us our website. I want to thank you for our attention. I know I pretty much talk. I'm not used to talking very short periods of time, but I want to make sure that in the future, because this is going to be videotaped and this is going to be something that we have as a presence online that we can use to talk to people and to educate on what is the journey of the immigrant entrepreneur, that you continually send me your comments, your feedback, your questions, your stories. You can reach me or anybody else at our department at successionconnect.ca. Or you can go to our website and find our information at successionconnect.ca. We'll bring these all together and we'll use this to help everybody else going forward. So I want to thank you for your attention, and I hope you had a great experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Levi. And as an appreciation for your time and expertise, the Chamber will be making a donation in your name to our scholarship fund. I would once again like to thank and acknowledge the University of Fredericton for sponsoring our Lunch and Learn webinar series. If you'd like to watch this again, or you want to pass it on to your coworkers, which I highly recommend because the session was really great, it'll be posted on the Chamber's website and YouTube channel within the next week or so. Thank you, and have a great day, everyone.